Hey everybody, welcome to the Ronline Report. Today we have one of the fastest rising stars in the 212 Pro division. Guy I definitely want to know more about. Joining us from Texas, John Jewett. How are you, John?
Thanks a lot for having me, Ron. I appreciate the interview.
I have to say I didn't start paying a lot of attention to you until last year. What a year you had last year. I saw you in Chicago, strong third place. Saw you in Tampa pick up a win. That was your first or second pro win in Tampa?
That was my first pro win.
First pro win, congratulations. Yeah. And then Olympia, geez, you went on to take fourth place, your first time on the Olympia stage. Not too shabby. The only people who beat you were Kamal El-Garni, who's been competing probably since before you were born. Derek Lunsford, the kid who's been runner-up, that was his second year in a row, and Sean Clarita. So, man, you beat out some amazing athletes, Ahmad Ashkanani, Samuel Haddad, Eduardo Correa, Hide Yamagishi. These are guys who have been pros for a very long time at a high level. And man, congratulations. So, time we found out more about John Jewett. So, let's go back in time. You got started out inspired by a couple of the guys that inspired a lot of us, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Platz. You know, what was the first thing? Did you see him in on videos? Did you see him in a magazine? What was the first thing you remember that made you think, man, I want to look like that?
Well, I was a kid of the 80s. So coming up through the 80s and early 90s, it was all muscle was everywhere. As a kid, you're watching for me, Predator and Commando and watching Stallone and all these movies and Van Damme. So these were all the guys that I thought were just super cool coming up. And to have that look and that ability is what always kind of interests me. So coming up, I had done all types of different sports. I did martial arts, and then finally getting into like high school, middle school time when you're getting exposed to weights. And I kind of realized you have a knack for it. And you're like, man, all right, I'm ready to really like go all in on weight training and what I can do.
Cool. So the interesting thing is, you started out not training like a bodybuilder, according to some bios I've read. It was more like you gravitate towards powerlifting. Why didn't you immediately look into how the bodybuilders were training and train more like that? What made you decide that powerlifting was the way to get to that physique faster?
Well, I started in high school. I started powerlifting because my knack was strength. So like I started in freshman football and kind of realized quick in the off season that I was the second strongest guy on our football team. The other guy that was out benching me was a lineman.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, wow, this clicks when you find something you're like good at, you just gravitate towards it. So I found some guys that powerlifted here in San Antonio. They were like around 40, late 30s. They already had like world records in powerlifting. So I immediately got hooked in with these guys that knew exactly what they were doing and what I should be doing. And it totally opened up another world to me because at the time you're like the strongest guy in your high school pretty much. Then you like realize, oh wow, I'm nothing compared to these world record holders.
Hmm.
But since I was good at strength, I assumed that getting strong would also lead to me looking big too, and it just wasn't the case. Like eventually, I set some world records in powerlifting on my own, and I
12
got
of them, 12 of them. Don't be so modest.
yeah, I was well, but people would look at you, and I would range from 200 to 220 pounds, but people would look at me and they'd always guess I would be 20 pounds lighter than what I really was. And it would kill me because, you're
Hmm.
trying to be big as well. You want to look the bodybuilding part kind of. That was always in the back of my mind. And eventually I kind of got burnt out. Like I've done this strength thing. I want to look more like the bodybuilding. And so that kind of made the transition for me, and I gravitated towards bodybuilders that still had that kind of power building mentality. So, like Dorian Yates type mentality of training, Tom Platz or even Mike Mentzer, those guys that still had more of that high intensity style of training and kind of chasing numbers. I gravitated towards because I coming out of powerlifting, and that kind of made the transition for me into bodybuilding.
So what was the main difference for you? Was it, I read it was the rep scheme. You just started doing more reps. Did you start adding in? Had you always done some of these isolation exercises like the lateral raises and the curls, or was that something you didn't do until, college when you started making this transition?
Man, I don't think I barely ever did a lateral raise the whole time I powerlifted, or definitely not an overhead press. Like there was no need for it. It's like you're getting the training specificity for powerlifting is such revolves around those main lifts. And looking back, I should have had more variation because it kind of led to some issues that I've had just without having a lot of variation in movement patterns, and that's led to some injuries.
Hmm.
So, but looking back, yeah, I probably didn't have as much variation within training, and going transitioning into bodybuilding. Um, I carried a lot of that in, and looking back, I would have changed a lot of that too, because you need to understand, like in powerlifting, you're trying to use the most efficient mechanics you can to move the heaviest load possible.
Right.
In bodybuilding, you're just trying to expose the muscle to the greatest stimulus possible, and the load is the load. Like if it's a lighter weight, that's even honestly better because of the longevity you can gain from that. So you're almost looking for the least efficient way to move an external load. And it was hard for me to adjust that mindset because I would change my rep range, like you're saying, like it was a lot of less than 5 reps powerlifting, moving them to like 6 to 15 rep range, but the same mentality of trying to become very efficient at moving loads. And that led me to use like heavy loads in these other rep ranges, which I led to like overuse issues and injuries occurring when I should have like really nailed down form and not try to just make my lifts efficient just to move the weight. And that kind of like slowly has been a progression over time into now it's like very controlled form, full range of motion, and the loads will progress when the loads progress. I'm not trying to force a load progression if it's not there.
Yeah. So you had these powerlifters when you started powerlifting, you had people that helped you and showed you the ropes and this is how you do the correct technique. When you transitioned to bodybuilding, were you sort of on your own or did you have anybody help you out in that aspect?
No, I was on my own, and I I love to read. So you say you research, but back then, what is really research? It's like reading articles and what other people have done. So I've read a lot on different training systems I wanted to try, and so that's how I kind of started, just on my own, tinkering around with things. Was probably how a lot of guys actually start out anyway. I It was hard to find like a bot. There's not that camaraderie in bodybuilding like there is in powerlifting. Like, hey, all the powerlifters train down at this gym. Like you got like 5 guys bench pressing all at one time. Like you don't have that bodybuilding. It's like there's that one solo guy in the gym maybe that doesn't seem as approachable,
Yeah.
and it's hard to find that group to have that teaching. So I didn't have that at first, and it took a while of me. I was self-coaching myself. The first 3 shows I did my own preps to finally where I'm like, I got qualified for nationals. I'm like, man, I, I might have a chance here. I don't
Yeah.
know. Do I really want to roll the dice on my self-coaching, or should I try to find someone that has done it before and how other athletes, coached at that level? And so that's when I finally got a coach, which was a huge step forward for me because a lot of the stuff that I didn't have quite right. I didn't have the experience of the skillful eye. That's just something that comes with time. Like you can have all the right science and textbook, idea of doing things, but if you've never seen it or know when to make the right calls, you just won't know. So hiring the coach was a big step forward for me, and that was in 2015 when I
Oh
was
wow.
going to USA's for
So
the.
who was your first coach?
So that was Matt Jansen.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool. Okay.
yeah. So in 15, I was a middleweight. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's like the legend of John Jewett.
I
You know,
know.
that was the big talk when you won the 2016 USA as a heavyweight. Man, everyone was like, "This guy was a middleweight last year."
Right.
So everybody assumed you had gained like 40 pounds of muscle in a year. Was that the case?
It's not quite there. I mean, like weigh in to weigh in, yes, but I was probably around 184 ish before making weight to that and depleting down to make middles at 176.
Yeah.
So you take that off, then you have to think like when I made weight for heavyweights,
Yeah.
I weighed in at USA's. I was 215,
Okay.
but that also was me not having to do a single thing to make weight,
Hmm.
right? So I'm eating and drinking all normal all day. So if you factor in like, well, if you had to deplete to make weight, maybe that's another 6 pounds you pull off. Then the 6 pounds that you didn't have to pull off as a middle.
Right.
So maybe it was really more like 28, 30 pounds,
That's
but still
come
substantial.
on. That's almost unheard of. I mean, that's still legendary. There's not many guys who do that. Plenty of guys put on 30 pounds from year to year, but they're fat and they don't make the top 15. That doesn't really count. But to go from sixth place in the middleweights one year to winning the heavyweight division at one of the toughest amateur shows in the world, that's astounding. That's people, no matter how many pro shows you win, people are still going to always talk about that because that was one of the great amateur accomplishments of this particular generation.
It's funny because going through that whole like 15 to 16 season, I just keep fullness. So the whole process was just so much more efficient. I've just never been put through that,
Let me pick it up with that question. So yeah, John, between 2015 and 2016 USA, 30 pounds of muscle was a tremendous achievement. While you were putting all that muscle on in that interim, did you realize how much bigger and better you were getting?
No, it was. I was kind of oblivious to the rate of progress that was really happening. Post show, my weight came up. I ended like at 8 weeks after the show. I was already up into the 220s, and I'm sending Matt updates, and I'm concerned. I'm like, hey, man, my weight's coming up way too fast. Like, I don't want to be getting too much body fat. He's like, dude, you still have glute lines in. You really just eat and keep training. This is going great. I'm like, well, okay. And, I ended up that off season hitting about a peak weight of like 230, 232, which wasn't that high for a heavyweight. Usually if you're going to be a heavyweight, you might be in the 240s or something. But it was just good quality. And then coming back down into the USAs to be a heavyweight, I was able to not have to chase fat loss the whole time like I did in 2015 because I came to Matt in 2015. I was 12 weeks out, and I was like, "Hey, man, I need a coach now." And I already started dieting down from like 230, thinking I was going to be a light heavyweight. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm 230. That's light heavyweight territory." It's like, no, to get true conditioning, which I hadn't been, it was pulling me all the way down to like a middleweight. So to make that happen at the rate it needed, we were like pushing cardio hard. There was no time for all these refeeds. But for 2016, it was like I was starting prep at a much better spot, able to utilize refeeds, able to grow into the show initially, and also have those days of higher calorie feeding up into all the way to the USA. So the whole process was just completely different from what I had used to do. I think I've gotten just way too fat in the off season. Like I think all of us have done that. Like that dirty bulk, not dirty bulk, but it just you just let fat come on too much and you chase the scale, and you spend the whole prep just trying to tear it all off. So
yeah. You started that prep, you said, with some lines in your glutes?
That was like 8 weeks after the show. I already gained like 20 plus pounds. I still had some glute lines in. But then for USA's, no, I was a little smoother, but at a much better spot than I was for 2015. Yeah, I think I just had like an ab outline in 2015, so it's like,
that's right.
Yeah.
So that explains a lot of you had to crash diet basically for that show.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I want to let people know you're actually very well educated in all this stuff. You have an MS in nutrition, a BS in exercise science, and you are a registered dietitian and a certified strength and conditioning. Oh, did I get it wrong?
That's all the letters.
So has all of this really helped you in your own training and nutrition, or does a lot of that really only apply in a clinical setting to like sick people or people with conditions, and not so much for a healthy bodybuilder like yourself?
Well, with everything, like I've always wanted to understand the why behind what I'm doing and why it works, and so that whole education pursuit was basically driven behind my interest in bodybuilding, powerlifting, everything around that. So I thought, well, to be the best and know how to implement nutrition or training, I need to understand every aspect of it, and so that's why I just kept pursuing that education route. There's definitely coursework along the way that had no relevance to me as a bodybuilder. Like I worked in the hospital for 3 years in clinical nutrition, in ICU, NICU, acute rehab. And I knew how to do all those things, but yeah, like none of that, a lot of that doesn't transfer over to what I needed for bodybuilding. There's great coaches that don't have any like formal education, that have just been doing it for years. And so education, I mean, experience definitely weighs so much more heavily into, I think, what makes a great coach. But I think that education background, it does give you the critical analysis tools to know how to disseminate between poor information, good information, and also, make the right calls and where to find credible sources too. So it definitely aided, and also gave me a good thought process on approaching bodybuilding, like kind of like a scientist in a way, and I'm very meticulous in the way I do implement all of my strategies for nutrition and training. I go like a scientific approach, but also definitely weigh into what everyone's doing anecdotally and what these coaches have done for years and years without a textbook needing to tell them to do that. So it's been beneficial to have both mindsets in developing the bodybuilding approach for myself.
So you have the actual science knowledge and you have the bro science knowledge, and you've sort of married those together and made the perfect blend, I would think.
I
Yeah.
try to, you kind of along the way, you start getting more sciencey, reading more studies, and kind of lean towards that more. Or then you'll start, getting more influenced by just bodybuilders and what they're doing, and not trying to tear it down with science and say like there's no way that works, or maybe it just hasn't been shown to work yet. And so I think you get a good grasp of like the gray area where you should really operate versus like black and white with what science has. And it has been, it's an evolving marriage of science and anecdotal bro science. So
Have you had to sort of break up the arguments? Because sometimes I'll see on social media, wherever, a bodybuilder will say something that he uses to apply toward himself or toward clients in a diet situation to get them in shape. And somebody will say, there's no science to back that up. There's no studies to back that up. And, do you ever jump in there and say, well, this is what works in the real world? And I know the science too.
Man, it's rare that I get into those type of social media debates, and I've had a few that I've picked into, but honestly, usually if someone comes on that strong immediately, they already have formed a strong opinion about it, and there's really no swaying them, and they're looking for that back and forth battle. And a lot of times I think some of these guys just want to gain that attention from maybe like an athlete or someone that has that status. And now you're investing all this time into this conversation that's leading you nowhere. So usually I'm like, hey, if someone wants to believe something, great. Maybe I'll, chime in on a thought, and I can weigh right away if that person just comes back or if they're willing to considering something, and then I can educate them on it. Also, the approach needs to be respectable too. So if you're going to tell someone that they're wrong, usually the first reaction is that they're going to be upset and defensive. So yeah, if you can approach it and try to use it as from a good space in your heart, and you're educating them, if they still come back and they want to be defensive, well, hey, walk away, do what you want, bro. It's no issue to me. So yeah, I try not to tie myself up with that too much anymore. I put out a lot of content, information, and education. Sometimes people won't like it, but again, there's more than one way to get it done. So
let's go back to your career now. So 2016, you turned pro in July, and a lot of guys would have just said, okay, I'm going to launch into an off season. Maybe I'll see you guys next year on a pro stage, maybe not. But you decided to get right up there. That very year, you jumped up on stage at the Dallas Super Show, the Phoenix Pro. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. It was a Phoenix Pro. You did that one pro show for that year. So how far away was that from USA, and how soon after winning USA did you decide on that show?
Yeah, so that was 8 weeks after the USA's.
Oh, okay.
And I had about 2 week window decide with Matt where we could either push up and like, hey, it's going to be open time, or maybe 212. But since I weighed in, I was right at 215 at USA's. It's like, hey, you could do 212. You're also right at the cusp of like, you might never really be improving again as far as adding more tissue on. You could, have maturation or, better quality and peaking process. But as far as like, adding what could 10 more pounds of muscle do? Well, you're not going to be doing that in 212. So we made the call like, well, hey, 8 weeks, more dieting, and I can jump into 212. So see how I stand. If you get blown away and you need more size, well, there you go. You have that validation in it. If you hang, well, then maybe, you could consider doing 212. And so went out to the Europa and got fifth. And it was a good lineup. Charles Dixon won that show.
Yeah.
Heidi Tata was in it. Guy Cicinierno.
Yeah.
So and it was good. These are all Olympia guys. So it was a good lineup. And I took 2017 off, just considering that, hey, I'm going to move to the open. Like, I enjoy training and just improving. I love just getting bigger. That's why I got into bodybuilding. I just want to be that big and strong guy. But I got up to like 260 that year.
Wow.
And I went on a trip with my fiance at the time, and to Dominican Republic, and I got this terrible like stomach bug parasite. Came back, and for the next 5 weeks, it was an array of different GI symptoms.
Oh my goodness.
That be like every week it would kind of be a different system, and you think like, oh, I'm getting better. Then something else would go wrong, or like maybe it's something different. Finally, I had to go to a gastroenterologist, and he's like, well, I actually think you're on the upswing of this thing. He's like, I know it's been 5 weeks. If it's any longer, we'll do cultures and the whole thing. But I ended up getting better. But I ended up losing 20 pounds over that course. And I would eat, and still, like, I was just dropping weight. So I ended up at 18. I was like 240. So I'm like, well, shit. Should I do a show? Because I'm going to be back down to 212. And that was the plan. I was like, well, let's just do this 212 again, and maybe we can improve. And so 2018, I hit New York Pro.
Yep.
And then I did the Dallas Europa that year.
And
New York Pro, that was a rough prep to get ready. I wasn't quite ready for that show. And I think probably coming off that sickness had messed with me, and my body just wasn't wanting to respond and pull down. And we had that New York Pro, you gotta make sure you know your weigh-in schedule for these shows, because in New York, it's a morning weigh-in.
Yep.
And then you have like 2.5 hours before you're on stage.
If that.
And so for someone that's like right on the cusp of 212, like it's really easy for you to be very, very flat on that stage if doing so. Then at that time, like, I've kind of wanted to get back into the self-coaching thing. And I had thought about it for a while too, even about doing New York. And Matt was like, no, man, let's do it. I'm like, okay. So, but after New York, I decided I want to try to peak myself for Dallas. And I did. And I came back at a fifth, which, it was all right. It's kind of haven't really improved as a 212. And I looked really hard that year after the show of like, where am I lagging? Where are these guys beating me? And seeing my waist, I was like, gosh, it's just, it looked flat. Like, it's not that I don't have ab development, but I looked watery on stage because the ab development wasn't there. I looked like kind of blocky next to the winner, who was Alex
Cambronero, yeah. The class, he's in classic now. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he has a tiny waist and super wide. And, so I'm like, okay, well, I need to get this waist as small as possible and more lats and delts. That's as much as I can work with for being close to weight class. So I took the rest of the off season and just trained my waist like crazy. I learned to vacuum. I couldn't do a vacuum. Like, me walking on stage, vacuumed was like ab is flat. So
right.
like, well, that's not going to cut it. It's like, I was determined I'm going to pull a vacuum on stage. And I learned how to do that. And it actually brought my waist in smaller, just having better control. Resistance trained abs. I hadn't been doing that. So I actually had the fullness in my abs to where when I did get flat, because those time you're going to be a little bit flat on stage. So if I got that flatness, I would still have some pop in my abs. Okay. And then it was really focusing on the lats and delts. I had to still kind of pull myself away from getting away from these big movements. Like, hey, I want to deadlift because deadlift is just fun and I enjoy it. But it's like a shotgun blast for the whole backside versus me needing like a sniper rifle to like hit just lats. You have to get very training specific, and that specificity for deadlift just wasn't cutting it for the development that I needed. So I had to get more isolation focused and take out movements that were generating so much fatigue that were taking away from the volume I could apply exactly where I needed it. So that's kind of what led me into the next 2019. I'm like, I'm going to do this 212 thing. I think if I've improved my waist, that I might have a shot this year,
Right.
But you know, the whole time, this whole 212 season, I've always questioned myself of like, should I be open or should I be 212? I never felt that confident. Like, you know, am I at the peak of my 212? Is this it for me? The muscle wise, where I weigh, can't really change. How much more can I really improve? Could I ever get to Olympia? So going into 2019, these were all thoughts that were in my mind going into Chicago. Just, you know, taking a swing at it, just hoping for the best. And it was a fast moving year, like you said.
I mean, you did so well last year. So I got to ask you now, do you realize 212 is a really good home for you? This is where you should stay, and this is where you should try to just keep improving on?
Yeah, last year was eye opening. So it was definitely after Chicago, I realized like, you know, I got confidence that I can win a 212 pro show.
Yeah.
And that's what led me into Tampa. Then you're like, holy crap, I won a 212 pro show.
Yeah.
And then now I'm going to Olympia for the first time. And it's like, well, man, this is going to be the best in the world. Guys I've never stood against. You know, I've done so much undercutting of myself and goals. And like, man, I hope I just don't get last place. Like that was the goal of my first show I ever did. And now you're like, you know what? I have to change that thought process. And, you know, I'm going to Olympia to hell, I'm going to win this damn thing. And realistically, like, yeah, if I was top 10, sure, hell yeah, I'd be happy as hell. But I had that change in mindset that I could win the 212s. Like this is doable. So I think all this past year has really instilled that confidence in me that I could be, you know, that 212 champion. So 212 is a good home for me. But I haven't ruled out the open. You know, it's always enticing to see what you could be at your best. And by best, you know, you might win 212 shows.
Yeah.
But what would 10 more pounds of muscle look like not having to cut weight?
Right.
You know, you think about like Hadi Tada, or not Hadi Tada, Hadi Chupan.
Japan, yeah.
You know, comes up to the open and looks pretty gnarly. Also a great 12 competitor, but you know, you might have your best look at the open. You might not. Maybe you'll get way too overshadowed. But I think this should be an interesting year, at least for some of these guys. Like I always think about Flex Lewis moving from 212 to open. Like, oh man, I just really want to see this happen. So.
We all do. We all do.
So yeah. So for me, I don't know. For sure, 212. I'm qualified for Olympia. You know, hopefully it happens or doesn't get pushed back or something. But that one year at a time.
Well, going back to Olympia, I mean, you know, when you won the Tampa, that had to let you know, wow, I really do belong here. I'm good. I'm pretty damn good. But when you get that first call out at the Olympia, you know, most guys first time at the Olympia don't even get a look. Honestly, you got first call out, and you, like I said, you beat out some very good guys who've been up on that stage many, many times before you. A couple of these guys have been runner up multiple occasions, and you beat them. So, I mean, did the Olympia in particular let you know that you're better than maybe you originally had thought you were a couple of years ago?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. I think just winning Tampa let me know that I felt that there. Because Chicago, I was off. I was pretty flat on stage, and I didn't feel like I had brought up the best look yet. Yeah. And Tampa really nailed that look a lot better. That peak, I was full, I was dry, and so I felt like, man, I have a shot at doing well at the Olympia. And so Tampa did a lot for me. So going to Olympia, I felt confident. A lot of people were talking, you know, you hear this talk about what they predict, and you're like, well, I don't want to like buy into that and think that, and then you get disappointed, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, getting up there and actually seeing those call outs, it's eye opening when you finally get those judges like taking a look at you and that realization like that you are in that lineup. So,
did you prep yourself for those shows last year?
No. So yeah, I ran my prep into Chicago until I was 4 weeks out. And then I'm like, you know what? I know I can prep myself. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to have, that validation in myself of knowing I could do it. I got really conditioned. But what I needed at the end was that third eye, you know, or second eye, someone else to look kind of like objectively at me. And that's when I hired Andrew Vu. So Yeah.
Hearing that name more and more lately.
I,
Andrew Vu. Yeah.
he's got the eye, you know?
Yeah.
He's not a nerd like me. He can't like explain the science, physiological mechanisms of, things. And it doesn't matter because he knows the look and when to make the call. And that is such a skill that many people, it's hard to have. So I've been working with him, and he's a great eye, and we work great together because he lets me do some of the sciencey, nerdy stuff, and I'll program in a lot of like the nutrition and details of things, but he'll like be the eye to be like, hey, let's do this, or maybe I'll have an idea, he'll be like, no, you're trying to like run yourself in the ground, John, just back off a little bit. So it's a great team up with him, and he ran prep all the way through the Olympia from there.
Wow. And he's local. Is he in your part of Texas or no?
He's in Dallas, which is like it's like 5 hours away. So
Oh, geez. Big
yeah,
state.
I know. You say, oh yeah, we're in Texas together, but it's
Yeah,
like
it's Texas. People don't realize how big Texas is, man. Try driving across Texas sometime, guys. You'll see how big the place is. Yeah. So I got to ask, what were your plans for this year competitively, and has this whole quarantine situation changed your plans?
so yeah. After the Olympia, you're already qualified. Since I was fourth, the plan was just to put it all into the Olympia.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me to try to do a show prior to that. I am interested in the Atlanta show, Athleticon.
Sure.
Haven't heard a lot more details about that, but it's pretty later in the year, so I think that'll be more to come.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like what I've had my eye on for this year. With the coronavirus occurring, there was some uncertainty at first as far as like, because what happened here first for us was the food excess. Well, in like almost every area, like you couldn't get meat. It was hard, so it's like, oh well, gosh, we're trying to bodybuild here, and we can't get meat, so that makes it a little bit challenging. But it wasn't too much of an issue, so I had already kind of stocked up a little bit, just from how I normally buy food in bulk. I have a deep freezer, so we're fairly stocked well. The gyms did shut down, but I do have a guy who used to powerlift in college. He started a business called Texas Strength Systems here, and he does all the high school powerlifting meets in the area. And I'm like, hey, Wes, do you have any extra racks? He's like, yeah, man. Well, he shut down the gym. He's like, just come take a rack, come take a barbell, 600 pounds. So he just let me borrow. I have it in my garage, squat rack, 600 pounds, and barbell, and then I have some 120-pound dumbbells. And I got some dumbbell handles so I can load some plates onto those. So enough. Man, give me a barbell and some dumbbells. I won't step back at all. I'll keep making progress forward with that. So that's what I have been doing. But at least for here, we're in 2 weeks. They're about to open the gyms.
Oh wow!
So,
Okay.
For our area. So.
Yeah.
So overall, we haven't been that limited. I just coach online. I do content with Animal. So my wife and I, we're always at home. So it hasn't really changed much as far as the living and social aspect. We're just homebodies anyway. So the only main thing was changed was like, hey, we're not driving to the gym. We're just going to walk into the garage and train.
Which in some ways is actually kind of better. It's a lot more convenient.
It sure is. It's like a 20-minute drive to the gym, which whatever. I enjoy it, just getting out. But it is nice just to step in your garage and come right back in. It makes you a little bit more efficient. I know some people don't like it because it gets distracted, but that's not the case for me. Like I love to train, so whether I'm at the gym or at the garage, it doesn't change. I'm just as efficient in there. But it's almost nice. It's like, hey, maybe I'll keep the home gym around. Just training it every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of bodybuilders are in that situation now where they've been getting equipment or they've been adding to whatever they had, and a lot of them they're going to keep that setup because we never thought this was going to happen, but now that it's happened, it could happen again. There could be like Corona 2 or something, a sequel to this. Who knows?
Don't know.
But having it like right there, if you need it, man, I think we've all learned a valuable lesson about taking things for granted for sure. Because gyms, I never thought I wouldn't be able to go to the gym. That's ridiculous.
I know.
I mean, I can't go to the gym. That's crazy. Can't go to the restaurant. Come on, I can always go to a restaurant. But so you're in a good spot because you're qualified already for the Olympia. If the Olympia gets pushed back a month or two, which I strongly suspect that's going to be what happens, I don't see it happening mid-September. I think you guys are going to get another couple months tacked on, but you're already qualified, so you're not scrambling. Oh no, where am I going to qualify? What show? And I feel for these guys now that they're all freaking out. How am I going to qualify for the Olympia?
Yeah.
Because gyms open up at a certain, different states are going to open up at different times. So maybe some state won't open up their gym till June, and these guys go, oh no, I gotta get my ass in shape, and I gotta qualify, and I gotta be, it's going to be it's going to be a lot of struggle for a lot of people. But
yeah, it's like, how many shows do you have left to the Olympia to qualify, and what are they going to do? Are they going to have, more placings will be allowed to qualify?
yeah.
But then you even think like, all right, we think about ourselves just in the United States, and this is the season that we're in. You don't think about like in Australia right now, this is their winter time, so it could, I don't know what would happen with the coronavirus and if it's affected by this weather, but or even traveling issues for these international guys, maybe we might not open up traveling for even longer. So that could be other issues that those guys face. And a lot of the guys in Olympia are international. So, to take them out, man, that would be really unfortunate, because you always want that competitive lineup at the Olympia. But, if it gets pushed back, yeah, it's okay. I was just talking to Andrew earlier, and it's like, hey, we're dieting. I'm 20 weeks out. Like we're going to pull down.
Yeah.
If in the next 2 months I diet, I get leaner, we find out the Olympia's pushed back, there's no harm in it. If they don't have the Olympia this year, hell, we just did a mini cut, no big deal. So
good spot.
It's for being 212 and having the muscle there. A lot of the year you're kind of in maintenance mode, which kind of sucks to really have to say that. But you're really just, you're maintaining that tissue, and you're just, when your prep starts is when you're just pulling down body fat. So for me, it makes it a much more comfortable position versus, some of the lighter 212 guys are having to really have timing their improvement season, and, when they're doing, supplementation or taking breaks and starting prep. Or like you said, the guys that actually need to pull down and qualify, and then also consider getting over to Olympia. So if it might get pushed back. I feel fortunate though that I am already qualified.
I believe improvement season is an Andrew Vu catchphrase. Logan, I think he coaches Logan Franklin too, right?
I don't know. I don't
believe so. Oh no, that's AJ. He's got AJ Sims, but
that's
I think
right.
Okay, so that term is actually becoming widely used in general now. I think instead of off season, people are saying improvement season, which I like the sound of that. It makes it sound like off season sounds like you're being lazy, you're not doing anything.
You're not really off, right?
Right. Improvement season, you're working, you're getting better.
Yeah, you're getting better. I guess mine's maintenance season, right? Because I really do think, even if you're in a weight class, there's still a lot that you can do to improve within your own aesthetics, or maybe you're improving. I've done a lot with like mobility and rehab this season because of my powerlifting past and neglecting things. Yeah. So you start having tweaks and niggles and stuff that's popping up. You're like, why is this happening to me now? Right. And it's like, well, it's because you're a non-functional bodybuilder. It's like, so it's time to start doing like functional movements and training muscles that have become weak, and so you can prevent these injuries from happening. So learning more on that front as well. Trying to make sure, like, if you're going to be 212, I think like, man, I could do this for a while. Some of these guys are in it for years, into their 40s.
Oh yeah.
The longevity is there. You just have to take care of yourself. So that's been at least part of my improvement season. Is
how old are you, John?
33.
That should have been like one of my first questions. But yeah, oh, dude, that's like a baby in bodybuilding.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, no, back in the old days, that was like you're about ready to retire at 33, but now, you got guys still trying to turn pro at 35, 40 years old. So, geez.
Yeah.
So I guess the last question is, division wise, you're doing so well in the 212, but no matter what division somebody's in, unless they're in open, it seems like they're always trying to push you into some other division, like Bumstead. Everyone, his fans. He's the freaking Olympia champion. You still got people saying, well, what about, when are you going to move to open? You want to move to open? But dude, I won the Olympia. Come on. Yeah. I mean, do you feel like open is where you ultimately want to be? Or do you think you can keep getting better and be happy doing very, very well as one of the top 212 pros in the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something I still struggle with, battling between wanting to go in the open and really test what you would be at your best. Of course, you might be considered like, hey, you might just be a top 5 pro show open guy. You would never even get to the Olympia potentially and go into the open. Would you be okay with that? What is better career wise? Is it better to be a winning 212 guy or like a fifth place pro show open guy? You kind of have to weigh that out. Like, or nowadays with social media, it almost doesn't matter. It just matters if you're putting out the right kind of content. Some people just want to follow the freaky looking guy.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's me. The freak. I don't have some freakiness factor to follow. But then the other aspect is longevity. You know, so what would you have better longevity in? 212 is a lot easier weight for me to hold, and 240 in the off season is a lot healthier for me than versus having to be 260, 270 off season.
Yeah.
What it takes to get to that, would I have better shelf life just staying 212? So those are all things that I weigh out. I like to still stretch out this 212 thing for a bit, and once I feel if it's getting stagnant for me, then I would step to open. You know?
You also got to ask yourself, would you look better with 10, 15, 20 pounds of muscle or not? You know,
Yeah.
there is a point where everybody looks their best at that weight, and getting bigger a lot of times doesn't make them better. And people say, oh, you should have stayed at, I like the way you looked a couple of years ago. Now it's, you know, these are tough. These are tough choices you guys got to make.
They are. At some point, you add so much size, and that's when you just see you guys waist go, you know, and you lose that aesthetics and you get blocky, and it's not a better look. So it's still bodybuilding. Aesthetics matter, and I feel like nowadays it matters even more than what it did like several years ago. Before Classic came around, it was just like muscle and mass, and now you need that aesthetics there, which it always should have been there. But you're right. Like moving up 10 pounds, it might not look better. As much as you want to be big, it still might not be best for stage.
Right on. All right. Well, I want to encourage everyone to follow you on social media. Instagram is John, spelled the normal way, John, Jewett, Jewett 3, because somebody already took John Jewett and John Jewett 1 and 2, I'm guessing. So
my dad and grandpa.
Okay. Oh, are you a third?
Yeah, I'm a third. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's commitment, man. That is commitment.
Right.
Are you going to do that? Are you going to do that to your son one day? Make him a fourth?
Man, you have to live up to the third though. Like, can he do it?
That's like that's like a royal family once you get to a fourth.
See, it sounds kind of cool. I would be really tempted to do it. All my family calls me Trey for three. It's like Trey is like 3 in Italian. I'm not Italian, but that's where that comes from. So yeah, they my mom didn't want to call me John. My middle name is Herbert, which
no, I'm sorry.
They're like, but we can call him Trey. It's like, okay, cool. So I don't know what you call the fourth.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a nickname for the fourth, but
it just looks cool. It just looks like it's a king or something, you know, King George the Fourth or something.
Right.
King James the Fourth. Cool. Well, John, it's been really good getting to know more about you. I'm glad that quarantine is treating you well. Glad to hear gyms in Texas are going to be reopening soon. I'm hoping we all get back to business and back to normal life soon, because this is like a sci-fi movie we're living in right now.
Right.
This is nuts. Yeah, congratulations on all the success you've had so far, and looking forward to seeing what you got left in store for us. I know this is that little tip of the iceberg that we've seen so far. Like honestly, until last year, I knew who you were, but I was like, I don't pay attention to people sometimes until they start doing really well, and then I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss this guy? I was at that show. But man, you're on the rise now, and I want to keep witnessing that rise. So cool.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Ron, and I appreciate you having me. And it is the tip. I'm going to keep bringing. I look forward to whenever this Olympia is going to happen. I will be there, and I'll be ready.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching Ronline Report with this man, 212 star John Jewett, and we'll see you next time. Stop recording 1 second. I just want to make sure I